Hey everybody, we're live. It's night. I have to be a little quieter than usual because people are sleeping here.
I don't have to be quiet at all.
You don't have to be quiet at all. This is going to be fun. I don't know if you'll join us live because it's midnight. That's crazy. For everybody, assuming most people are going to watch the replay, and I'm ready to talk about this because so many times on the podcast when I ask a question of like, what do you think is the worst? Amway comes up as there's the grandfather, as they start Amway because they love it, Amway because of that case. And then there's a lot of people that are like, wait, what? Amway case? What? And so there's this juxtaposition of like people being really over it and people being like, I have no idea. And I think this will bridge gaps. So I know the Cliff's Notes version. I've read Ponzinomics and I've talked about it a couple of times. So I know the Cliff's Notes version. But I said, Dave, let's do this. And you brought it. I was so worried. I was like, oh, slides. You sent me the slides, and I was like, fine to do this. I want to thank you very much for taking my plate and doing amazing slides. These are incredible.
I thank you. Roberta and I are having a few technical difficulties. I do hope that everyone is having an easy time with it. I am trying to navigate around it. I do apologize, Roberta, if I speak over you. It is not my intention at all as a white man, but I am trying to be mindful of the fact that I should be quiet until I hear that you're finished. But I also don't want to leave a lot of dead air. So we're gonna try
totally
to work
fine. It's okay. It is in time, and it is. You said like 3 o'clock. I am in San Diego. It is night, and for some reason, he's on a hotspot, and it's a little weird. I think last time when we talked too. So there's technical difficulties. We apologize. We are doing the best that we can, but I just want to say, Dave, I'm to watch this presentation and learn about this case, the FTC versus Amway. I started going through these slides. It's very fun. There's a lot of early text that lead up to this. Hey, Katie, there's a lot of early context that leads up to this case, even like being a thing, really presented. So I'm going to go through these slides and I'm going to let you sort of navigate through the story.
Sure. Yes, I also want to hear a little bit from you because I know you've done.
Yes, of course.
Hey,
the other day, the Daves. These are not the Daves that's savvy.
Right. We are on the other side of that spectrum.
Pro Daves. Yes, we're Northern Hemisphere. It's midnight, and we're just gonna do it. Okay, so this is an amazing presentation. The FTC versus Amway. Here we go. Okay.
So in order to set up the context,
let's start back.
Oh, and I'm already starting with a sidebar. Usually you don't do this, but I was trying to figure out how do I order these slides? What's the importance of this? So before we get to talking about the history of Amway, I thought that we should go through some of the cases that set precedents for what went on.
Absolutely.
In the FTC versus Amway case. And one of those big cases that you might often hear the name of, but not really associated with MLM, because I think a lot of us didn't have any sort of idea about this company. It's called Costco International. As you can see, there's a mink oil. I think it's like some sort of cream that women put on their face.
Yes. Supposed to be moist.
So I don't know anything about mink oil. Is it from the animal, or do you have any?
I believe so.
Knowledge? Okay. I don't know how you get it. For me, oil comes from a plant, like a lot of the plant oil. So I don't know how you get it out of the mink. I don't know.
I'm not sure.
But
I anyway. Have seen mink oil products in other places.
It's not unusual. Yes, certainly. It's another beauty company, right? That came out of the 70s for the MLM startup. So a lot of these sort of blew up after Mary Kate became slightly famous. Other people were like, hey, it's a woman doing it, so as a man, I can probably do better. That sort of like mindset of confidence that I guess a bunch of dudes have. So Glenn Turner started this company, and it ran into some problems with the FTC. The FTC went after them in 1974. And something you'll notice with these three cases that I'm going to cover is the fact that you could buy in to certain ranks. And that really was sort of where the FTC was having a lot of success with prosecuting companies. So with this one, you can spend $2,000 to get the supervisor rank, and as your sign up, and then $5,400 in addition to that to get your purchases.
Okay, so Katie helped us out, Dave, and that Google mink oils from rendering mink fat that is removed fur into the fashion industry.
Oh, okay. All right, that's a little bit more humane than I imagined, but still, yes. I mean,
is there at least they're using all of the stuff? I guess trying to find a silver here, but
yeah, absolutely, yes. There is a silver lining somewhere. Perhaps not within the MLM schemes, but yes.
What's money for 74?
Right. Yeah. I mean,
$2,000.
I don't know. Right. This was in 1974. Yeah. So if you prorate that to today, you're looking at a fairly large chunk of change, right? I mean, I think it would end up being a little bit more than the LuLaRoe buy-in, but I mean, it sort of is of that essence, right? But this was just for cosmetics, right? This wasn't like a large shipment of clothing that you're selling racks of it in your house. So the commission found that pyramid schemes forced participants to pay money in return for these two things, right? So this set up this definition that the FTC could then use that was in case law that they were using to evaluate all future cases. It would be a pyramid scheme if you paid money in order for the right to sell a product and the right to receive in return for recruiting other participants into the program. Rewards which are unrelated to the sale of the product to ultimate users. So this statement, and especially that last clause, rewards which are unrelated to sale of the product to ultimate users, that became something important for the FTC and a lot of MLM companies to sort of fight about as to what that really meant. And
the
it sort of came down
user means, right?
Right.
Like the fight. Oh, what does the ultimate user mean? Mm-hmm. To me, the ultimate user would be customer outside of the community, regardless, and not any people that are using the product that just because they love it for the discount on the inside of the pyramid.
Right.
I've heard a lot of things when people say caught rules. What is inconsistentness?
Mm-hmm. Right, and Peter Vanderdant, he spoke about this in the MLM conference last year. So if you want to check that out, it's still on the MLMconference.com website. I would recommend listening to him because he was a senior economist to the FTC. He's retired now, but I mean, his knowledge of this area is far more extensive than anything that I can offer. Both Roberta and I are not experts in law or can offer any sort of legal advice in this regard, right? So if you're a pyramid scheme and you want our support, we won't be there for you. Sorry.
Sorry.
Yeah, we did some reading. That's all we did.
We just read some books and websites. And then Dave amazing slides. So I there with holiday. We did the whole Christmas was magic. I'm familiar with Joe Romar.
Yeah, Joe Romar.
Joe
Romar. That's what it is.
I've never heard of that one.
It just appeared for me. Yeah, I heard about it from someone in the MLM community that isn't so popular, who likes to talk about Amway tool scams. But this case sort of set up how the courts were managing the idea of the endless chain. This was sort of the pushback against the idea that, oh, well, you're not actually going to recruit everyone. So it seems ridiculous to sort of use that as a limiting factor to the possibilities of pyramid schemes or MLMs. So there were some comments about that the judge had made about the fact that, oh, well, there's over 200 million people in the US right now. This company only expanded by a couple thousand people. It's never going to get to that point where it's everyone. So this seems silly and ridiculous. So we're not going to use this in our calculation for whether or not it's a pyramid scheme. And it reaps of someone who just doesn't understand the main point of bringing up.
Like that's literally scheme. Right. It gets to a point where it implodes and fails ultimately.
Right.
It just depends on how, you know what I mean? Like that's part of the definition.
And gifting schemes are still a problem, and they never get to that point where they all the people in the US have donated books to this one sister scam. So it misses the point, and the whole idea with saturation is just, are you finding people to buy the products that are outside the network? And ultimately, the way that these operate is that you don't, because really the only way that you can convince people to continue to purchase the product is if they have a deep faith in that, and you culture that deep faith through indoctrination into the MLM as a distributor, at which point you shouldn't really be counted as an ultimate user, right? You don't rely on all the people in your Nike store who work for you buying the Nike products, right? You count on people actually wanting the products that you're selling. So
opening their own Nike stores.
Right. Yes. So Jerome Mar sold bras, lacy bras. I guess it was
the original Ruby Ribbon.
Yes, exactly. But they had to change their name, which, I mean, sure, please change your name. But they changed
nothing so sexy like slapping on my Jeromar. Come on, man.
Right. Well,
MLMs have the stupidest names.
They changed their name to Simbraet. Right. So I don't know who was sitting around the table making that decision, but it's I'm ashamed to say that MLM names seem to have gotten better. I don't know how that's possible. The ones that we have today
are longevity.
Yes. And unique. Yes. No, these are like 5-star names compared to what they had in the 70s. So Jerome Mar was kind of this challenge to the FTC, challenging sort of how they were approaching these cases and whether or not they could be continued. But I mean, they also had some success with Holiday Magic, and you have that story on your podcast about how it was handled. One of the details of the cases that really sort of stood out was, again, the buying into the scheme and being able to rank up. So the maximum rank that you could buy in at was master rank, or the master's rank. Of course, the lowest level was Holiday Girls, because he was who he was.
Holiday Girls to master. I mean,
I know. Yes, I mean, inspire Nexium much.
I was going to say, like Keith Raniere, Paige and Keith Raniere.
Right. Yes. And then it switches into like military logic. So you go from master to
Scientology.
General. Yeah. Yes. He's just reading all those books.
Weird. These cults. All the connections. How strange.
Yeah. Right. So the maximum you could buy into was the master's program, but then being able to get into the general program, you had to replace yourself, right? You had to replace the master's rank. So that's sort of where it really adopted that personality of like the airplane game or that sort of thing. You had to fill your seat on the plane before you could move up to the next class of passengers. Right. So that was easier for the FTC to sort of target as a problem. But I think it really gave the FTC some steam, right? They were like, okay, we're getting through these cases quite quickly. Some of them are arguing in are deciding in our favor. Others are giving us a little bit more of a challenge, but at least we're learning through this. So I think that really motivated them to go after the big daddy that was growing really quick across the US, which was Amway.
Right. And a lot of times we say like MLMs will throw their MLMs to the wolves to be like, we're not a pyramid. We would have been shut down. Because they are shut down.
Right.
We're not. We're still here. So it's like, this is the very beginnings of it, with Amway being like, they're the pyramid scheme, not us. Like, it's very much like the Spider-Man. They're all pointing that kind of thing. Absolutely.
Right. Yes, the meme. Yeah, it's been around for a while that Amway has sort of painted itself in a different corner than everyone else. And I mean, it's part of market differentiation, right? As a company, you want to be able to say that I am different than these other companies. Adidas is different than Nike for this reason. But within MLM, when you start doing it, you're saying that you're completely different as a functioning body, the way that your whole system works. But like when you start drawing out any of the comp plans. You're like, this is the same. It has different numbers associated, but it gets to the same place. And that argument was made by John Oliver in his piece.
Brilliant.
And and the sort of like the whole saturation argument was offered there. Again, people are fighting back against it. I understand why, but if you're only taking it as a very basic conclusion, like, yes, you're not going to recruit everyone in the world to this MLM. And anyone who thinks, hey, Denise, that we're going to get there, you're missing the point.
Right. Absolutely.
You're promising people who are joining the company that they're going to have the same success that you are, without acknowledging the fact that you were at a completely different starting point than they are when they're beginning. And you can't promise them that same thing.
Right. I mean, it's absolutely ridiculous to use of the whole world show how quickly and how exponential it becomes that it circles. We're done.
Right.
That's to show that the saturation is an issue. Like, I don't understand like how they can make an argument. Of course, like anyway.
Yeah, I mean, I think that lawyers like, I took math, I know geometric progression, but it's like, if you're someone who's approached by this idea, you're not sitting there in Starbucks saying like, oh, geometric progression. Yeah, that's a really bad thing. The moment you hear about this, right? That's not something that's front of mind when someone's saying like, do you want to buy this soap? It's really good for your clothes. You don't have to use a lot of it. So. And
it might your life.
Right. Yes. I'm sorry. Yes. I missed the all important part.
You missed the most important, the life-changing part.
Right. The little pearls of magic that are in the soap. This is a timeline
screen so I can see it. I'm in front of my computer. If anybody get full screen, see. Go through this. But here's a nice timeline that Dave made.
I'm working
1939.
Yeah, I'm working on trying to make this into an Instagram slide. I started on this a long time ago. 1,000,005 different other things came up in that time. So this is a work in progress, but I figured I'd use it because it gave me a starting point for Amway. So it starts with Nutrilite, and then Nutrilite folds into Amway eventually, because Nutrilite is what started the founders, Jay and Dick DeVos, Jay Van Andel and Dick DeVos, with Amway. Of course, they started it. So Jer Mar, right? You wonder where this name comes from. Well, Jay and Rich actually called their company originally Ja-Ruh Corporation, because it's the first two letters of their name, right? Like very like grade
very LuLaRoe.
Like, let's start. Oh yes, I guess so too. Yeah, I mean, if I was to ask a grade 2 to start a business, I would expect them to play something like that. But
like our business would be Rhoda Inc. Like obviously, they're like, what was the stupidest name? And we're like, Rhoda.
Right. Rhoda is better. We could do Rhoda, and then we could sell Toe Jam. Is it no? Jam. I guess that's already taken, unfortunately.
Toe Man, whatever it was. Oh man.
So
or whatever Mallory sells. Sweet.
Right.
Just sorry. Am I back to normal?
It's moving around, but I'm hearing you better, so it's all good. In 1949, Amway officially broke. Well, they broke ground on their own company, right? And that's right around the time Jay and Dick join Nutrilite as distributors. They rise up through the ranks. They become very popular. It's right around the same time the FDA is starting to go after Nutrilite for a lot of the false claims that they're making. I don't know how much they're associated with that, but you would imagine that at least they're aware that it's going on. If they're becoming fast ranking leaders in the corporation, then they certainly have downline that. You must imagine are at least aware of what's being said within the company. So they eventually feel that they've outgrown Nutrilite. They've been setting up something, I think it was called the Amway Distributors Association or something like that, the ADA, which eventually had folded into Amway and is now like an actual body within Amway that is like run by distributor elites, but also overseen by corporate execs. So it basically is just like a little pretend version of transparency. But they started that up originally within their group, and that's what sort of got them to be able to move out and explore other opportunities. They were looking at other options of products that they could sell that were highly consumable, and that became the soap detergent that they eventually launched with the LOC, liquid organic cleaner.
Yeah, the lock soap.
Right.
The LOC, yeah. So they climb the ranks in Nutrilite, become mega huns, branch off, re-pyramid, and create American Way, which is Amway.
Yeah.
And the later year, the FDA prosecutes Nutrilite.
Right.
They got out just in the nick of time.
Yeah. No, and Nutrilite was having these troubles, and Renberg, I know that you were reading Robert Fitzpatrick's book just before this to just sort of refresh, but definitely consult that as a resource. He walks you through all of those steps.
Yeah.
What inspired him traveling to China and playing with baby formula a little bit.
Yes, the milk.
Right. Yes. So there's he's an interesting character, and now his son is president of Nutrilite under the Amway brand, and he's posting this blog every week. So you can go check that out too if you're interested in that kind of stuff.
Well, the other thing was, like, as I've interviewed people from Amway, and then, like, as I've listened to your podcast episodes about Amway and like the stuff that we've done, and I hear about Carl Renberg as not this really amazing, wonderful guy, it's so interesting, the juxtaposition of how they herald this man is like a messiah almost, because he invented Nutrilite and invented vitamins. You can still sell Nutrilite, and it's once it was shut down, they absorbed it. I mean, not immediately. They bought it, and it's that is still to this day sold.
Right. Yeah. No, it's sustained all this time. It's wild, and it's hard to see that Gary Young didn't borrow a lot of this sort of obsession around a key figure of natural science or whatever it is that you saw in Carl Renberg, right? Like, these are ideas, and I'll get to this towards the end, right? A lot of what happened in this period is really sort of what spawned what we see today in the behaviors and personalities of these MLM companies.
Interesting. All right. So where were we
go
here?
From we got to about 1972. 1972 is when it folds in, and then Amway starts expanding. And one of the reasons why Nutrilite was sort of like was sponsoring to their like downline that they had at the time, it's so good that Amway is acquiring us, because now we can share all of our amazing products with people around the world. We're no longer just stuck in the US. And Amway fulfills that by expanding into the UK in 1973, which is sort of their gateway to Europe. And I mean, Amway did a lot of things in Europe around this time. It is the Cold War era. They were sort of crossing lines into Germany as well. Like there's stuff going on there with Amway, which is interesting, just because it is so the type of organization that it is with their leaders. But we go from 1973 into 1975, and March 25th, 1975, the FTC files for this complaint against Amway in terms of it being any number of things. So it lists it that they must, the Amway Corporation and the other affiliate body that is associated with it, cease allocating customers among their distributors, right? So Amway was deciding where some of the customers would end up under distributors, which again, like to meet their customer rule, it sort of calls into question what the heck is going on here. Fixing wholesale and retail prices for their products. They were taking retaliatory actions against recalcitrants. So just people who had problems with the Amway model, they would undermine them. And we also had that whole period of Procter and Gamble with a lot of Amway representatives within different lines of sponsorship, sort of calling people and warning them about the demonic presence within Procter and Gamble. Like there's all this stuff going on. Disseminating price listing data, which fail to advise their price adherence is not obligatory, right? So you just have a number of problems that the FTC is sort of calling attention to, and they want to see addressed with one of the major players within the market. And there's also the which we see today, right? The misrepresentation of potential earnings and other relevance to prospective distributors. So when you're recruiting these people, you're not necessarily giving them an appropriate image to the idea or the opportunity that you're offering. So this is back in 1975.
1975.
2022.
Right, I was like,
we haven't fixed this problem yet. We knew it. We knew it existed. And we know
it was
it's only gotten
there.
worse. So
A little bit longer, just a couple months later.
Not even, like it was May 25th to June 6th. Right?
Okay, so like
literally
2.5 months. Yeah, like not very. Oh, May. Yeah, I'm sorry. I'm thinking March. It was just May. A couple days. Yeah.
Was it May or March?
Whenever it was. Let me see. Let's go back. March. Okay.
Okay.
A couple months. So like 2.5 months ish.
They need the time to set up the meeting. And
they also needed the time to get this gigantic constitution framed.
Right. When I first saw this picture, I'm like, okay, well, maybe it was there. Like maybe it's just in the White House and they just
like that's the presidential constitution prop that they're like, hey, you want a picture of the president? Did you want the constitution in it too? You're like, yes, it did. No, that is not a thing.
We'll see shortly, but you can also see the little image up at the top. Like you can see that Dick is holding on to that constitution. Like he owns
his arm.
Yes, he brought that with him.
That's his constitution.
There's more going on there, but yes. And you can see Gerald Ford just flipping through the pages of Belief, the Rich DeVos autobiography, I guess. I don't know. His son has now sort of taken this branding and has also started his own podcast called Believe. He's interviewing people like academic leaders from it's not Hamline, that's where Stacey Bosley is, but Purdue, I think. He interviewed him being like, why are colleges getting so expensive and why are you doing such a good job doing this? I'm like, he really should not be saying anything. He's not the type of person.
What I should have said was nothing.
Yes. I wish he would adopt that lifestyle.
Well, I'm curious here. Was Ford pro MLM? Like Reagan was, or is Gerald Ford in this picture being like, hurry up and take the picture? Like, what is happening here?
So this is just after the Nixon impeachment, right? And then he's taking over as leader of the Republican Party within office. Gerald Ford comes from Michigan. Okay, so that is the big connection.
Well, there you go.
Right, like just like buddies, they definitely know each
Good
other.
Old boys.
Yeah. So if Amway wanted anyone to be in the presidential office at this time, it was Gerald Ford.
They're like, yes.
Right. And I'm not saying that they influenced that decision at all, but I mean, like, they certainly
we're not saying they didn't.
Right. I mean, they certainly had the interest in wanting that to happen. So at the very least, it played in their favor. So the full list of accusations, the counts that were on file for this case were they engaged in resale price maintenance, allocated customers among their distributors, restricted distributor advertising, misrepresented the substantial income that may be obtained from geometrical increases in the number of distributors in the chain. So that was sort of targeted with the there's no saturation argument, and then misrepresented the profitability of the distributorship, and then also take into account the high turnover. So we're going to look at some of the accusations in turn, and then we'll discuss some of the impact that this case has had.
Yeah, it's very interesting. Like DC says here that the cycle of exploitation continuing with the money of the people who are getting scammed is devastating. It's interesting to see, like Dave said over here too, like how long this has been going on.
Right, and people were aware of it. It's
aware of it, yeah.
Yeah,
and just sort of like brushing it under, creating loopholes. I mean, even the laws that have been created have like trapdoors. So it's like they know.
Right, because we don't have that important sort of voice that is there in government being like, let's craft the policy this way, right? But the Direct Selling Association and many of these companies have that direct line to say like, no, let's make sure that our company is not covered by this because we are obviously legitimate. We haven't been in that much trouble with the FTC yet, so we're all good. So some of the accusations that we're going through, and I just pointed this out because I'm trying to fully grasp what is happening. Apparently, the way distributors were paid within Amway at this time in the 1970s, which I mean, you don't have, I guess, direct deposit. I don't know what Amway was sort of doing at this time with paying money, but apparently you would pay it to like your highest upline member, who is the direct distributor for your upline, and then they would hand it down to their initial downline, and they would pass it down to the downline after that. And then if you're there in that sort of fourth rank position under a direct distributor, you would be getting that money back. But if you were doing a return, it was sort of like only paid out in a 25% increment, and it was sort of based on like how much your upline wanted to give back to you. So like you kind of just stuck around. I don't really understand how it was working, but it seems like,
I mean, it seems like Scrooge McDuck runs Amway, and he's got a big bag of money, and he just takes out a couple scoops and then says, okay, take out what you, and then pass it down the line. And then eventually the downline's like, where's our money? And they're like, you don't get any, sorry. And then it starts all over again. Yeah. But the refunds is like, everybody had their own refund. Like, it's just strange because it's not a company policy. It's an individual upline or line of affiliation situation.
So like these sponsoring distributors in turn pay rebates to their wholesale customers from 0 to 25% based upon their own monthly dollar volume of purchases and so on to all wholesale levels of distribution. So like you can kind of decide like, do I want to give you that refund?
Yeah, but then also I think it's like they're giving you your cut of a percentage. And so like if they're giving a refund, then they have to take your bonus out of that too, because it's like, allegedly. And then it's like, it's very complicated. So yeah, I could imagine giving refunds to a pyramid scheme would be pretty complicated.
Right. And I imagine a lot of people just don't bother going through that process, right? Because it's so time consuming. And
absolutely. Even now. And when it isn't complicated, even now people are like, you know what? It was only $25. It's fine. They still have that attitude even now.
Right. And at the end of the day, too, know that if you have any relationship with that person who's above you, right, you know that you're screwing them over a little bit by returning that product. And it can be hard for some people, depending on how much product you bought. And if you're really upset with them, right, it might be like, at least I get you this way. But I think a lot of people have that difficulty.
Michelle Carpenter. I know. You're 2 hours ahead of me. It is 2:32 in the morning where you are. Mind your own business, woman. Anyway.
Well done, Michelle, for saying
that. You better practice what you preach, and you better go to bed, Michelle. Okay, you have to be up early to have a show. Endless Chain. Did I miss one, or are we here?
No, okay. I think we're here. So Endless Chain is that same sort of idea. So this was one of the main arguments, right? The substantial income or profit as a result of wholesale or retail sales activities from multiplication, duplication, or geometrical increases if the number of distributors at lower functional levels of distribution is likely. So with this, I don't know about you, but this whole idea of duplication and the fact that you take your best practices as a distributor and you are wanting the people downline from you to keep repeating that, right? That is an essence to MLM. You require that your downline. You want the people to keep doing that same thing again and again. And if you have one instance of a problem, right, you submit one piece of evidence to the FTC, that should be substantial enough to realize that, oh, this problem is probably pretty widespread because everyone is repeating the same behavior that everyone else is doing. And the FTC recognizes this, they use this language. So hopefully, like with our comments that we are submitting, there is this realization that there's not just a little bit. There you go. You got someone standing up for you.
This potato club in the comments. I swear, man.
That's good.
No, I mean, we talk about the Endless Chain all the time, and it is a cornerstone of a pyramid scheme. It is a cornerstone of an MLM. It's interesting that we talk about it all the time now. It's in Robert's book. It's something we educate constantly. And here we have it in 1975, and they're like, this is a problem.
Right. Yes. And they don't just know it as like a slight problem, right? That they recognize it as like, this is what's happening, and these are the
Right.
problems that keep happening because of it.
Right. And we
So,
even see this now. Anybody that's in an MLM now, that's like, the duplication. If you're like, but I want to be successful, I heard it too. Find someone that you admire that's higher up than you and just copy them. Do everything they're doing and just
all the
emulate
coaches
that.
are doing the same
Because
thing.
if what they're doing works, then it's going to work for you. If you just keep at it, eventually it'll work. Something's got to give. And it's like, yeah, it's a bank account, usually, is what gives.
Yes.
So overload the senses.
Yeah. So Amway was like, they got us pretty good here. Like, I don't know. This is my assumption, right? What can we do, right? Obviously, we're a large organization that has thousands of reps, approaching millions. Why don't we just submit a ton of papers that they need to go through? So, like, this happens in a lot of cases, right? But yes. So the FTC also offers witnesses, because one of the problems in the Gerald Marr case is that they only had one witness, and they didn't necessarily confess to having a large loss due to the MLM. So a lot of pushback from the judge in that case was just like, you don't necessarily need to prove that loss will happen, or that the deception led to some sort of material loss. But you do need to at least demonstrate how it exists. And I'm only seeing theoretically through this like saturation model how it could happen, and I don't believe the model. So I think FTC submitted some of their witnesses, but you also have Amway submitting theirs. So like 7,000 pages of transcript. They also submitted some of their tape. So there's 23 tape recordings that were submitted, which had a couple pages 2 or 3 feet high.
That's insane.
Yeah, it's a lot of material, and like what those Amway tapes are like. Like there's no point going through that. And this isn't the worst of it. Like this is just setting
indoctrination.
up. Yeah. But this is just you can see the way that the Amway lawyers are paid very well. They get through a lot of this stuff.
Wow. Here we go. These things, the lines of affiliation, the tools of business.
Yeah, I actually, Kayla and the Essentially Over MLMs had just been speaking about Rich Dad, Poor Dad. Yes, Jamie. They were speaking about Rich Dad, Poor Dad. So it's almost like we're all planning this whole like 24-hour stream all out. Like it's like we're masters behind the scenes. It's good if you believe that. Yes. But these are some of the tools that were used for Amway. This was referenced slightly in the report, not to maybe some people's level of expectations, but it is there. It was specified. And ultimately, the problem with the sales kits is the fact that you are routinely buying it and you end up spending way too much money on it. And that's actually where a lot of your upline is drawing most of their money from. They convince you that it's the products and the material rewards that are being received through the Amway business. But it seems, at least through the claims made by people who have left, that this is like a substantial size of their profits, right? 2/3 in some cases, when they're making hundreds of thousands of dollars a month.
Quick question for you, Dave, from the other Dave. Serious question. Are there still ex-MLM employees in the FTC? I think you mean the opposite of having former FTC members as the heads of compliance departments in MLMs. And yes, that does exist, and it's still a thing. And I know you probably have a couple examples off the top of your head. I don't, but absolutely.
It happened with the Herbalife case, in the sense that the council with the FTC, they joined Herbalife during that whole procedure in 2014, 15, right? We have Ramirez, Edith Ramirez, who was actually prosecuting, or not necessarily prosecuting, but part of the FTC chair at the time that they took the action. She joined a law firm company in Washington that is actually employed employs, that law firm is employed by the DSA, and one of their members sits on the chair. So like she shares at least an office building with the same person who's sitting on the DSA offering them legal counsel. So there's a lot of this sort of like mixed up kind of, I left government, I've served the government, I paid my dues in the public, and it's like, now I want to get paid. I know all
now I'm going
this.
to go to the private sector.
Right. And then my value through going through this is in this area. So
yeah. And having expertise and like working for the government, and then having this expertise and having a billion-dollar corporation say, we want to literally pay you and take care of you. And like, you'll only have to like do stuff every so often. You just got to run our compliance, make sure it's FTC. And they're like, oh, that's super easy. Okay.
And I'm sure it's pitched as like, you're going to help us change for the better.
Absolutely.
Because that's always there.
We want to be more in compliance with the law.
Yeah. We want to be leaders for everyone else. And I mean,
right.
That is Amway's messaging as well. Like Amway in India has sort of trumpeted that. And I mean, I don't know, I'm sure people in the chat or at least around, you might be aware that the executive directorate in India has taken action against Amway. They've attached over $100 million in Amway assets. In fact, Robert just published a blog post about the whole situation. Right. But there is this sort of pushback against Amway in India. And I mean, you can be hopeful that that action is important, but also including it in a comment to point out the fact that like there are other countries that are getting tipped off to how these companies are operating, and they're having problems with them because even though they might be in compliance in the US, they're not really relying on the US for their growth, right? They don't need to engage in these deceptive practices here because they have a downline that's now expanded overseas. And that's where they're committing a lot of these offenses. And the FTC is not there to patrol them. It is other nations, institutions, and regulations that are taxed based on a lot of other things that they might be dealing with. And they're relatively new schemes for them. So they don't have the case law to really rely on to be able to prosecute these companies properly. So it's harder for them.
So here we talk about some of the major impacts.
Right. So what did this lead to? The Amway 1979 case, why do we hear about this? What's the importance? There's three major takeaways that sort of define how the FTC sets out its priorities based on the decisions that are here. And now the FTC doesn't necessarily use these as guiding rules. They never really admit to that, but it seems to be how a lot of case law gets decided once the FTC brings these actions to court. So there's the buyback policy. There's the fact that you can return any items. The fact that you can return any items that you've purchased, right? There needs to be some sort of refund policy in the company. Yeah.
It's usually about 90%. They have, like a 10% restocking fee or whatever. But most, and I believe all MLMs, because of these Amway rules, have to have that buyback, right?
Right. It's kind of like this sort of red flag for the FTC if you don't have any sort of return policy, right? Because you are just encouraging the inventory loading, which is what this buyback policy is supposed to prevent against, right? So if anyone does or purchase too much one month, they have the ability to return any products that they've over purchased. And I remember the first time that I'd heard that how this is managed differently in other companies is when you shared your story with LuLaRoe, and in terms of you had to check that box when you were getting the orders, committing to the fact that you had sold a certain percentage of your stock, and that's related to the next point as well.
Yeah, that stuff changed all the time. Like they had all these things that we had to click, and then all of a sudden then it wasn't there anymore. And then there was a tax one, all kinds of crazy stuff. I wish I would have taken screenshots back then. I wish I would have known.
Right. Well, you don't, because you think it's going to be there when you see it pop up. Yeah.
Right. So we have the 70-30 rule, which a lot of these MLMs get away with enforcing this rule by having a checkbox on their on the buy page, right, where the little buy button stays grayed until you check that you have in fact on your best behavior Girl Scouts honor sold at least 70% of the inventory that you bought.
Right. And you know that your upline is not sort of encouraging you to just sort of like click through that.
It's an honor system.
Right. Yeah.
It's trick or treating when the lady down the street leaves all the candy in the bowl on the porch and says, I'm not going to be here.
Mhm.
Do you take one piece? Maybe. There's definitely people that take the whole bowl. So it's like, it's this honor system. So even though there's this rule, there's no enforcement of the rule.
Mhm.
Except a check marking box. I need this inventory. Sure. Yeah, of course I sold 70%. Whatever. Get the buy.
Right. Yes. And you're never going to feel anything from that, most likely, right? You're not feeling any sort of concern from that. And plus, how many of you are reading this case law, right? Like it's not of your mind when you're making this decision. So and I think the other point to this when we're making our FTC comments is the fact that even if we do impose regulation on these companies, right, they adapt, they change how they do business, and they will, as a business, or if we can call them that, but they're at least making decisions that are wanting to put profit first. Right. And in putting that profit first, they're going to be trying to see how do we still meet regulations, but also allow us to survive. And allowing them to survive, it seems, based on all the evidence that we can pull up from the companies, is that they need these internal purchases to be happening. They need internal consumption to drive their business. So that 70%, we don't see it in MLM. I know a lot of them will claim that, but then they often no proof, right? Just like in this case, apparently the administrative law judge, which Robert does a great job of breaking down and being like, hey, this doesn't really make sense that the FTC just stopped here. Right. But they had said that they looked over it and the FTC accepts that he looked over it. Again, do you trust the guy doing his homework?
We looked over it. All right. You said, did you look over it? And we looked over it. So yeah, we looked over it.
Yeah, we ordered pizza and we went through it.
Yeah, we looked over it. It's fine. It looks good. Next, approved. Moving on. Yeah, and then the final rule is the 10 customer rule. Will you explain that?
Well, it's effectively some of the other ideas rolled into this concept that we don't only rely on internal consumption. We have at least 10 different customers. So we had Michelle's cat. We had a couple. But
what a booming business! You have 10 customers, and that's 10 customers.
Right. Yeah, and they have lots of people also having 10 customers. So that's how they're getting these $150,000 checks every month. Right, everyone has 10 customers, so it's how it grows.
You just tell 10 customers to get 10 customers, and tell them 10 customers to get 10 customers, and then after 13 levels of 10 customers, everybody's a customer.
Right. Yeah. So at the end of the case, you sort of get to this point of respondents have also made earnings and sales claims. So we have that point again. The FTC is pointing it out as a problem. They settled on the point that, okay, we don't have the geometric progression argument working for us. So we're just going to point out that they've made earnings and sales claims to deceive potential distributors, and they should stop doing this, please.
Yeah. In 1970, this is, Jesus.
Right. And if you look at the comments, right, like a lot of them are related to Amway. So it's like, if this did anything, we shouldn't be seeing this in 2022. But
right.
It is there. And
it's crazy.
It's very hard to look at this decision and be like, okay, well, justice has been served. It is all okay. Everyone did their due diligence and job in this case, and there was no sort of like dealings going on outside of what is on the documents that are presented by the court. It's hard to leave with that impression when you see the actions the FTC had taken previously against companies, when you look at the evidence that's presented in the case, when you look at the findings and conclusions that the FTC makes. Right? At the end of the day, there at least should have been some sort of fine issued to Amway. But instead, it's just like, Amway, you need to follow these rules, please, and stop doing the earnings and sales claims. And it's like, this is in 1979. Why did I hear all about the scammy stuff that Amway did after that?
Right.
Like, was no one watching them?
Of course not. I mean, not only is it Amway that continues this behavior, it's every single MLM that then in turn came out of this decision and then got to follow the Amway rules. As long as you've got 30, 70 and your 10 customers, like, you're not a pyramid scheme.
Right. Even though the FTC wasn't admitting to the fact that they were following that specification, right, it ultimately did legitimize the use of this model.
Absolutely. So, if you tell one pyramid scheme that the way that they're running is okay, right, all the other pyramid schemes are going to say, you know what? Let's just preemptively run it the way that's okay.
Yeah. There's a couple more takeaways that we'll get to. I know we're running late.
Yeah, no, we're good. We're good. We'll keep going. We're good. We have 10 minutes. We can get through it.
These are a few more pictures. So as you can see, this is actual Gerald Ford sitting down and signing that Constitution for Rich DeVos, and them just looking happy and sully in these photos.
An autographed version of.
Yes, and this is just sort of a layout of the court as well.
Oh, right. How the court, how you get to the Supreme Court.
Law judge was sort of sitting in presentation of that. So the FTC was frequently going through the U.S. Circuit Court of Appeals with a lot of their cases. They decided not to with one of the biggest players in MLM, and it's just beyond me as to why that decision was made. Perhaps the changes leadership or whatever, but whatever. Anyway, this was celebrated in 1979. The DNC inducted
it was a victory.
Rich DeVos into their Hall of Fame, being like, "Hey, he saved MLM for all of us. Look at us. This is."
He made it legal.
Yeah, he got his Lifetime Achievement Award a little bit later.
He legitimized this for the world. Let's give him an award. He needs some dopamine. He did a good job, Dick. Or well, no, it was Rich. Sorry.
Yeah, Dick, Rich. I think interchangeable.
Isn't Rich the son and Dick's the dad?
I think. Well, Richard, the short form for that is Dick, right? So.
Oh, right. Yeah.
I think they call him both, but there is Dick Jr. Maybe, I don't know. I'm confused on that as well. But I didn't want to look into the family tree too much because I already have kind of enough of Amway on my brain. So
I think it's crazy.
Yeah,
that they gave him an award.
Right, and you still have them praising him, right? So Joseph Mariano gets up in, I don't know when it was, because the founder of Amway passed away, and Joe Mariano had some good words to share before that had happened at this event. So that was in the 2010s sometime. So there's some other tasty tidbits to take away from this case. Amway head office was directly involved in information control, right? So they were preventing people from writing letters to distributors because they didn't want the FTC to possibly collect them during their audit of records. Even when engaging in illegal product sales, the distributors were still the main customers, right? So this one guy was trying to sell his products illegally, and it was mostly people within Amway that were buying it from him. So, like, I mean, if you want to point out that, like, no, there's actual people that want to buy these products, that's not a good look for your company.
Right. It's like all the people that buy it, sell it.
Right. Yes. The distributors obtain Amway products about a 30% discount off the retail price. Many of them consume large amounts of the products every month, right? So they're just admitting to this internal consumption, even though other parts of the docket are saying that, like, no, it's perfectly. We have at least 10 customers per person, and 70% of that is consumed outside.
Yeah. So he placed an ad to sell his Amway, and the question said, "Did you receive any response from the ad? You personally?" And he goes, "Yes, we sold quite a few things, but also most of the response was from other direct distributors in the area." Right. So again, it's like that 10% makes it outside.
Right.
This just goes right along and just continues to prove that point.
Yeah. This is just sort of numbers on the distributor count, right? So these are the new distributors that are getting every year, right? So about 500,000 new distributors are joining Amway every year from 1972 to 1976.
A quarter of a million.
Turnover happening, right? But they're saying, like, oh, that turnover is much better than it used to be. We used to have turnover between 50 and 60% each year, but now we only have between 40 and 50.
It's only got it's a little better. It's just a little better.
And you also have them saying, like, other MLMs have 100% turnover. So, like, we're doing much better. Look how
100%. Yeah. Do you have that? Do you have a source for that? It's like, no, of course. We just made it up.
Yes. They were also, of course, Amway was saying, like, you can't accuse us of telling our own distributors about earnings claims in events because they're already distributors. So they were saying that that doesn't count. It's not fair for the FTC to do that. We should be able to tell them anything we want.
They're already members. You can tell them all about these ridiculous earning claims, even though we know it's just bait to keep you going. But since you're in, it's not getting them in. It's not recruiting. It's bait to keep you going, but it's not recruiting. So we should be able to continue that because
right. And they submitted complaints of grammatical errors for over 2,000 pages of the transcript that was produced from. So that took a long time for the court to resolve. Apparently Amway had this like supercomputer that they were running it through back in the 1970s to sort of assess the legitimacy of the transcript. And they were saying, it's very hard for us to do this because there's so many errors. Can you fix all of these errors for us? So
our computer is fancier than your computer and it can calculate better because
this organization that cannot pay their distributors well, that send out books and tapes to their people through other people, right? They're so technologically advanced that they have these other methods. They also like to trumpet their products as well.
Right, being the only biodegradable detergent that there was.
They changed everyone else.
That was them. I don't know if that's true or not.
Any of the big three, they didn't want to do it until Amway had done it.
I thought that
was in case law.
They call it the big three soapers.
Yes.
The big three soapers. I thought that was funny.
And then this is a graphic that I made. There's a full graphic to this just in terms of how MLM has sort of built up. It obviously doesn't involve all MLMs. I welcome anyone who has that information to share it with me.
Is this the beginning of the family tree?
In 1980, yes, this is sort of where that explosion happens, right? So, hey, we can do this. Everyone should do this. So
that line is 1980.
Yeah.
That orange line is 1980. Look at that. So before 1980, the legalization of pyramid schemes, we've got COSCOT and Amway and Nutrilite and everything. But over here now we've got Advocare, Mary Kay. Oh, wow. Look at the explosion. Wow, that's incredible. I can't wait to see it when this is done.
Right.
Anyway, that's incredible.
And
just a surprise sidebar.
I'm sorry. So this was from Peter Van der Naan. I wanted to put his stuff in. So and this is the next slide after this, but the DSA pushed back against the FTC's favorable decision in Omnitrition. Omnitrition had sort of decided that, like, actually, we're going to define what this ultimate user is. It has to be someone who's outside the distributor network. The FTC has been, or the DSA had been fighting so hard to make sure that that was never defined, right? Any of the legislation that they were putting forward, they wanted to make sure that that was so vague and there was no real clear definition for who an ultimate user was, because they needed that to include a distributor themselves. So Omnitrition sort of came up with this decision, but ultimately the DSA had tried to sort of box it in to just be, well, that was just decided within this circuit, so it cannot apply to any of the other case law. It was just sort of an opinion that was offered. In this case, it's not legal precedence. So that's the next slide after this. But then in our conference last year, on the last slide, Peter Van der Naan highlighted the fact that his definition for pyramid schemes, which is, in the context of MLM, a pyramid scheme is an organization in which the participants obtain their monetary rewards primarily by recruiting others into the same organization rather than by selling goods and services to the public.
Primarily.
And that was debated within the court, and it was ultimately decided that his definition did not materially differ from the court's own definition. So this is sort of like the lasting sort of impression of, this is what the FTC is sort of really pushing for right now. This is sort of in a lot of the cases that they're handling, thanks to this work of Peter and many of the other in the FTC. But they're trying to push us towards this better, sort of more refined definition that ultimately does penalize MLM companies, because it asks them, like, if you want to operate and receive the benefits of a business, you need to operate like a business. You can't be operating in this way where it's sort of an exchange for you signing up for this product and promising to keep buying it. So
Right. It's like, you promise to shop here, only here, all the time, at least this much every month,
right,
or
a little bit more next time, right? Like if you get a higher rank, it's like you have to come in a little
you
bit more.
shopped a little bit more last time, so we're going to actually increase your minimum that you have to buy now.
And you have a new car, right? So it can go in the trunk, or you expanded your home. So like there's that extra room for all of this new products. So come on.
Man. Yeah, and then the white paper. So I mean, just very interesting. It's very interesting. This was a beautiful presentation. I can't believe an hour went by so fast. Dave has a question on you, Dave.
I hope this was helpful to a lot of people. I mean, it's a lot of information. You'll probably have no fun going through the legal documents. It can be interesting to see just sort of the stuff that they try to pull in it. But yeah, there's a lot of things that MLMs can do in order to avoid anyone holding them accountable for the harm that they're causing, right? Because they want to live in that illusion.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I was pulling up I don't know who's next. So I was pulling up the lineup.
I think it's a episode drop, if I'm not mistaken.
Is it an episode drop? That makes it so much easier.
Right. It might be Danielle.
It is Michelle. Michelle's video for On Passive. Yes. Okay. I know I'm like talking so quietly. So quietly.
It is 1 a.m. for you. So
it is quiet. I'm like, shh. So everybody, Michelle is doing a video on Passive. That is a super creepy, cringy cult that Alonda has covered several times. We're covering Hunbot. Very interesting with Ash Mufara and their whole thing. And I know she talked about that today too as well. So just very interesting. Head on over to Michelle's channel. You guys know Michelle Carpenter. And have a wonderful night. The new episode of Hunberta comes out at 3 o'clock this morning. There is a live chat, but I will be sleeping because it will be 3 o'clock in the morning. Everybody who celebrates, have a wonderful Mother's Day. Thank you guys so much for being here with us for however many hours you were here. It is incredible. Dave, thank you so much for coming on the show. I love all of this MLM history. If you guys are super into this MLM history and want Dave to do more stuff like this, I'm super down because I think it's really cool. And there's a lot of different cases and different MLMs that we could go into. So much stuff. So have a wonderful night, you guys, but not right now. Have a wonderful night, you guys. Again, Dave, thank you so much. Go watch Michelle. Leave your comments. Have a great weekend. Bye.